Yes.
All right. Then we have Capablanca versus Tray Ball. They call on chessgames.com V for victory, as you'll see based on the pawn structure. So D4, E5, C4, C6, Slav defense against the Queen's Gambit. Knight F3, E6, Bishop at G5. Now, by the way, when you see E6, so yeah, typical Slav defense, right? And so you're blocking the bishop on C8. It's like, wait, why are you blocking the bishop? It seems passive. And as it turns out, the bishop is in trouble on C8. But often, it'll come out in other ways, right? Um, they're hoping to get an E5 break in later. White will do that too sometimes. They'll play E3 and hope to get it out later. Now, Capablanca doesn't mess around with that. You see the opposite. He brings the bishop out first. Then he could play E3, and he's sure it's going to get out, right? Yeah, Trayvall never gets his bishop. I mean, you have like B6 ideas to come out, in Keto. He ends up playing F5, where he's like, okay, I'm going to play a Stonewall Dutch, and I never get it out. But that's a very important feature of this game. So we trade it off. And now you see, look at the difference in the bishops. Bishops versus pawn structure. The bishops in relation to the pawn structure. What's the difference? You can see, what do you guys think is the difference here? Right out of the opening, what move are we on? We're on move 7. Right in move 6 to 7. What's the difference?
Well, black's bishop is really confined and white's bishop is not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge feature of this game. It's going to be about pawn structure, pawns the soul of chess in relation to the pieces. And this is the main thing we see, this horrendous C8 bishop. This bishop is just stuck in there. We have the typical kind of, the epitome of the bad bishop. So, oops. So we're going to play with that. And even though okay, so what? Your bishop's looking at F5. It's biting on granite, but that doesn't matter. You're technically a bad bishop if the granite is your own pawns. You're biting on their pawns, but hey, at least you're looking at the pawn, right? Maybe you can strike at that pawn with G4 or something, which he does later on. So that bishop is not destined to be terrible. Also, let's say you take or push, you can unleash the bishop this way, you can reroute it. You just have freedom of movement. That's the most important thing. This bishop does not. And white has more space on the queen side. Black actually has more space on the king side with F5. But we're going to keep gaining some space. But most importantly, interestingly, it's not just like, oh, where are your pawns? Is again, where are the pawns in relation to the pieces? Because of where the pawns are, we have fluidity. We can develop fluidly. They can't. So that's sort of space right there. We're going to see this. We'll talk a lot about space. But traditionally, space is defined by kind of the wall of your pawns. It gets deeper than that, but this is the traditional example. So he plays G6, making the bishop worse, limiting the options further, like rerouting the bishop. Even harder to bring out that light squared bishop. Rook B1, a little cryptic, but we're going to play on the queen side because our pawns are aiming toward the queen side. Knight F6, okay. Well, he wants to go to E4, why not? It's got 2 pawns grabbing that square. It makes sense to play on the light squares at least. Knight on H6 looks a little awkward, but he'll come back right now. Trying to trade off our knight, guard it. Bishop finally develops, doing nothing, but at least he develops to let the rooks out, to connect them. But you see, maybe he should have taken in hindsight. Now, why do you think he didn't want to take? Well, he's got to deal with the pawn coming in his territory. But still, in hindsight, like I said, it probably would have been a lot better. Better to have a pawn in there, kind of like filling your cavity, right? That's a weak point. Well, first of all, why is it a weak point? But then, you want to fill it since it's weak. But why is it a weak point? E5. Why is that theoretically a weakness?
Because no pawns are guarding it.
No pawns are guarding it, and not only are they not guarding it right now, but
nobody is guarding it.
no, yeah, but if it's weak, I'm talking about long-term weakness though, right? No one's guarding it now. The knight has the ability to guard it. It doesn't matter that the knight can guard it. It's still fundamentally a weakness. Why is that? Now, Nick, you said no pawns are guarded. But how would you define it? Not only are no pawns guarding it, but no pawns can. I mean, similar, but for long term, you know what I'm saying? Like not only like it is like they can't guard it and they can never guard it, right? But that's the clarification. No pawns can ever guard E5, right? Because like for example, let's say on F7, like no pawns are guarding, but they have the ability to I know what you mean, right? But just to clarify, whenever I say weakness, again, we're going to talk about that kind of fundamentally in terms of weakness and space, kind of traditional ways of viewing it. But fundamentally, no pawn can ever guard it. Like G5 we're putting pressure on G5, but it's not really a weakness because black can play H6. So you'll be booted pretty easily. But E5, the pawn's never going to boot you. Now it's a question of the knight. So it's a weakness. Then the question is, how accessible is it? Well, it's only accessible to the extent that black, or whether or not black's pieces can guard it. But if the pieces move away, then it's accessible. That means they're tied down to it. So weak pawns lead to weak pieces, weak squares lead to weak pieces. So we're seeing the weak square. Okay, the knight is guarding. Now after f4, he's like, fine, you can fill it. He doesn't fill it. They're like, all right, you lost your chance. Now I'll be happy to take back with my knight. Right. So this is, so it's like he has, you see a tiny bit more space only because of the c4 pawn. You see the difference? C4 versus c6. That's it, basically. I mean, there's g6, that doesn't really affect much, but in the center, at least influencing the center, these are all the same, stonewall setup, right? Here's the problem though. Black played a stonewall with the bad bishop. Now, if black had this bishop, that's a very playable position, right? But with the like that, then he doesn't have any really bad pieces. He can trade some off. It's playable. This is just a tough position for tray ball. Does that make sense? Because he's just confined. And the thing is, it's a stone wall. Everything's locked up, right? So you're locked up. You can't really free yourself. And the bishop is like, how is he getting out? And by the way, just a little note: if the bishop were ever to come out, well, first of all, it would be hanging right now if you play b6, c6 hangs. But just in general, you'd see c6 would become weak. Why? Because no pawns can guard it, right? They can't guard it now. They never can after b6. So it's problematic. Like, how do you get the bishop out? You can't. That's the huge problem for tray ball. Now, he's also going to gain more space with his pawns, but he keeps, okay, so he has a good position. His knight is guarded by the other knight, ready to take it. He never filled the cavity. That's how I view it. And he can push and gain more space with his pawns. So here we go. He's going b4 first. Also, we're restricting our opponent. He can't play c5. So this is where we're beginning to really control them with our pawns, right? Getting a good bind on him because he'd like to free his position with c5. And he just never really tried to free himself. So Capablanca took care of it. You have to try. You have to be active. Okay, rook goes to c1. I guess he figured it'd just be passive and hold, which didn't work, of course. Okay, now he wants to play over here, right? So he tries to slow him down with a6. And he says, okay, well, let's keep our options open on the king side. Knight comes in. Oh, sorry. Takes. No, he didn't come in yet. My bad. Later. Okay, so he takes, of course, he takes back with the knight, stays there. Knight challenges him. Very important move. We like our knight, right? We keep our knight. It's very sophisticated though, right? A lot of people would just leave it like, I don't want to retreat. Very natural to play, oh, I don't know, c5 or a4, because our action's over here, and ignore him and be like, oh, I'm still going to have a better bishop than you. But no, he wants everything to be better. And by the way, what's the policy? If you have more space, you should avoid what?
Great.
Exactly, Nikki, avoid trades. So if you have the corollary, if you have less space, you should seek trades. Therefore, seek trade, avoid trade, following the principles. So trade ball didn't, well, this was back in the 1920s. I guess, he wasn't the strongest master. He's a solid master, I guess, but not the strongest, not among the strongest like Capablanca. And the theory wasn't as developed back then. So nowadays, I guess, most club players would know a lot of these principles that maybe he didn't know yet. So rook
The
to
move
c8.
is like going backwards, like it would go against like, like my nature just because I wouldn't want to retreat, but now that makes so much sense. Like that's a really strong knight and he can hop back over there. Or
And
then like you
yeah,
said,
and just like and the knight, because the weakness, the knight has to passively defend it. So it's like either you move and let me in, or you don't move and I have the prospect of coming in and you're passive. And okay, technically you could say, all right, mine's on my third rank and yours is on your second rank. That's very subtle, but the
yeah,
point, you have the ability to do stuff with your knight, at least to threaten to do stuff. He doesn't, right? Oh, and by the
yes,
way, this is interesting too. One note here. What if the knight had gone here? Now we can trade. I would trade now. I mean, you can move away. It's similar. Even here, like, okay, we both have the same knight effectively. The counterparts are doing the same thing. Bishop's better. Well, why don't we have a way superior knight over bishop? See, I don't know. Bishop versus bishop would be nice here, but this is just utter. This knight's worth like a rook, right? Because it's such a strong
yeah,
knight. The bishop is worth like a point, right? So, in terms of, or less, the bishop's worth like 3/4, whatever. It's not worth very much, right? In terms of its value. And it's pretty hard to free it. I guess you can try for g5 maybe, but then he'd be exposing his king and he'd have other, no, I mean, then you'd have to worry about the knight, like rerouting to h6 and f6 and all this good stuff. You can also keep that in mind, g4, g5, squeeze him, reroute the knight to f6 and all sorts of good stuff. Similar to the game, but he would have a beautifully placed knight and you could just see the comparative value. And it just interestingly, if I'm going to click on, it's not, I don't think it's the best computer here on chessgames.com, but someone's already done this before, I think. So it says plus 1.7 as if white's position is worth like 2 pawns more in this, just because of the positional advantage, right? Just squeezing in. Okay, but we begin our squeeze with superior pawns, restriction of the pieces, right? Does that make sense so far? And avoiding trades. But and we're in the exact nature of the space advantage so far is that, okay, again, this is not really the fact that he's moved up 1 and haven't moved, that doesn't make a huge difference. If anything, it weakens his own position on the dark squares. But the fact, okay, we've met each other in the middle. White's moved up twice on C4 and B4. Black's only moved up once, C6 and A6. So those are very squeak, and you can literally quantify it if you want, basically in terms of how many squares you can move to. So if you wanted to count all your pieces and where they can move, you have like what, 1, 2, 3 with the bishop, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You can count like there's like what, I don't know, 25 or something. Whereas black has like, we could probably count pretty quickly, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like 13 or 14 or something, right? So we have about probably at least twice as many moves available to us. There's value there, right? Okay, he has more king moves than us. That's the only benefit of G6. He has more king moves. That doesn't really affect him that much, right? So you can see this like literally basically mathematically. Now it doesn't mean you're twice. I mean, it doesn't mean your position's twice as good, but it does mean you effectively have twice as much maneuverability, and maneuverability is an important element of the position. So, and the neural network, like in the like AlphaZero uses neural networks and effectively kind of weights things. Like essentially like your neurons are like making connections and like putting weight to certain things of value. So it would be giving a certain amount of weight to like the mobility of each piece instead of saying, oh, I'm up a piece, therefore I have 3 points, right? And we would do that intuitively, right? But there's value in that. You can already see. Now there's also value if the opponent has a lot of space, too much space essentially, or if they push too much and they have weaknesses, there's value for the opponent. Problem is Capablanca doesn't really have anything to attack, right? There's really nothing in his position that black can get at. Therefore, there's really no drawback here for pushing a lot of pawns. Now, if black busts open lines, then maybe he can exploit some of those squares that white's currently using. Maybe black gets to use those squares later, you see, to get behind the facade, but he can't. He just can't really get them. And Capablanca ensures that minimal activity, really no activity. So he waits, you see him waiting. So he decides to gain space now. It's not like black is going to free himself, obviously, because there's 2 pawns covering C5. But he's like, let's just make sure that, and that's actually why, by the way, he had B4, C4. Make sure, B4, G4. He can never play C5. You certainly can't do it physically now. It's physically impossible. And then there you go, more space that unleashes the bishop. But not only does it give us more, we can't get to C4, but it gives us a little more, technically behind there, a little more space to move, right? But really, it's that it gives your opponent less space. It's more about restriction than giving you maneuverability. Does that make sense? Because you've just taken away 2 squares from him, literally, right? You've taken away D6 and B6. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Even
Yes.
fewer squares. Before,
Yes.
look, those were 2 squares we had. It was what? There was 1 move and 2 moves that I mentioned. Now those moves are not there anymore. So now we're down to like what, 12 instead of 14. It'll get even less, I think. Knight F6, okay, he wants to come back. And that's where I'm talking about, like, we don't care if he comes in. We're pretty happy if he wants to create that imbalance of knight versus bishop, and we return to E5. Okay, so what? 1 move attack, go back, and the queen has maneuverability on both sides. And again, we're going to play on both sides, but that may enable us to get our final breakthrough on B5 with the most impact. That's actually what he does. Sometimes rather than solely focusing here, we're going to keep both available to us. Okay, so he starts moving. He's moving his knight back to F7, cover E5. We go H3, then we go G4. So why not? Let's get some play over here. There's no drawback. Again, you have to be careful whenever you move your pawns. But again, he judges here. Not much the tray ball can do, right? Given his piece activity. Okay, rook C2, so we can swing on both sides. And funny enough, this is more like intimidation factor than anything else, because he doesn't really have an attack, but he freaks him out a little. He's like, oh, let's meet you there. Okay, and then he squeezes him more. He's not going to take. This is very important, actually.
Is that like the pawn storm?
Right, he's going for a pawn storm, but it's actually a very important thing to note. You shouldn't really trade pawns in these scenarios, because think about this. Let's say you take. Well, first of all, doesn't black have a bunch of pressure on the e file now that he didn't used to have? Well, the knight can block, yes. But think about this. You've just traded a fourth rank pawn. If you think, well, back in the day, we would say king, pawn to king 4, pawn to king knight 4, right? Because we look at it from our perspective. So let's say, okay, let's just say from black's perspective, this was a third rank pawn. So that would be pawn king 3, technically. This is pawn king 3 for white. This is so pawn king knight 4 takes pawn king bishop 4, technically. But the point is, the fourth rank pawn gets traded for a third rank pawn. So your space advantage there just diminished. And now we have an isolated H pawn. But so you see it does nothing for you, really.
No, it doesn't.
Black has more squares to use now, right?
It does nothing for you but give away one of your pawns.
Yeah, it's
But
just a trade of
position
pawns that's
earlier,
unfavorable.
if he didn't take with that, he had a much stronger position.
Exactly, which is why he says, wait, I'm already on my fourth rank. You're on your third rank. Let's focus on the relationship between our G pawns or our king knight pawns, right? So if we go here, now my king knight pawn's on the fifth rank, yours is on your third rank. Does that make sense? Because if you think fifth and sixth, what's the relevance, right? It's how many up you've moved, right? You've moved up 1, I've moved up 3 from the original, right? So you can see the squeeze, comparative value. Again, well, there's a pawn on F5, you can't get there, but technically there are 4 behind mine, and there are only 2 behind yours. So that gives me much more space. It gives us much more space, living vicariously through Capablanca, right? But now you can use these skills. See, there's your V. V is for victory, right?
Oh, there's the V.
Well, it's going to be a better V. It's going to be that's a foreshadowing. We're going to get a bigger V, or for V is for vice, I guess you can say also. But yeah, so we began to do this. But let me just, since I mentioned it, another thing about keeping space. So for example, keeping a bind, space that he cannot free himself from, right? So for instance, like in this scenario, let's say even right here, right after this move, you play a queen's gambit, they go c6. So look, this can happen at any time, but fundamentally, you've moved up 2, they moved up 1. That's the slight advantage for white. If anything, white's not enduring, but at least for now, some fleeting advantage would be that you have a little more space than them. Equal space, fourth rank pawn, fourth versus third rank up, right? Or technically fourth versus sixth, right? But you're on your fourth rank, they're on their third rank. And so now if you they take back, well, you just traded off the space advantage. Now we have equality in space, parity, right? Here's another thing. Interestingly, you can gain space, but it's premature because then black will work to get that strike like Steinitz did. If you look at Steinitz's world championship match, first world championship officially in 1886, first game, he ends up getting E5 in against this bypass. And in another game, he gets B6 in. That becomes vulnerable. So the point is, you shouldn't trade right away because it gives up your space. But on the other hand, you also shouldn't get more space too early because that's where you'd expose yourself. So that's what, and it feeds into this game because Capablanca pushes strategically, right? He doesn't push until what move does he push on? Right here, that's move 20, I think. Yeah, that's move 20. He only did so when he's fully ready. He's ready for anything here, right? At least on the queen side. Well, now let's be really ready for anything by playing on the king side as well. I mean, to the extent, for wing play. But you can see the closed nature of the center. Nobody wants to push a pawn because they'll get taken by, there's 2 pawns on it, right? They'll get forked, actually. That's not a good move, right? That'd be a blunder. So the wing play, it's all about the wing play. And Capablanca dominates the wings, and that's where he makes the Vs. This is your classic wing play based on a closed center. Your classic superior pieces based on superior pawn structure that responds directly to which pieces are on the board, which is light squared bishop, pawns on opposite colored squares to give your bishop freedom. And then he's creating pawn breaks. See?
One question about that pawn break. I mean, doesn't that help his bishop, or like after you calculate it out, like it's not going to be so good?
Very nice. Yeah. For black, helping black.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. That's the crux of it. Very nice. So he needs to make B5 happen strategically. So that, because like, for example, let's say you do it now, this would be hasty. He waits until the right moment. Take. Okay, either black just keeps the pawn there. It's like, okay, you don't want to take my pawn. It's a double pawn. What are you going to do? You can't get through. You want to break through, you got to give up the bishop now. Okay, fine. White's probably still a little bit better. You can double it. You probably win the B pawn. Okay. If you can clearly win the B pawn, it might be worth it to trade. Okay. But you have to do it the right way. You want to get the most you can out of it. So as you said, like, you're just alleviating his plight by trading off the D7 bishop, right? So don't do it until you're really ready. That's exactly why, like I said, he kind of freaks him out over on the king side, but he doesn't even want to mate him here. He's like, I know I'm not going to checkmate you. Like, I'm not getting in, like, I'm not gonna, even if I get into G7, there's no mating pattern, but you're not gonna let me there. You're gonna go rook G8. I'm not getting in at all, right? And again, if I do try and open things, it does not behoove me, right? There's nothing going
Right.
on there. But he goes for H5. And now, interestingly, he stacks the pawn, but it's a pseudo sacrifice because you could just take it on the next move. And that's good. And then
And I love the way that he plays both sides of the board, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
yeah, and like I said, if he hadn't done that, well, first of all, Nikki, if he goes right away, he'd have to trade bishop, which he doesn't want to do if he doesn't need to, right? If he has to, fine, in order to break through. But the other thing is, by playing on both sides, it makes his original b5 strike better because you need to have a pawn break. Your pawns are well.
Right.
Speaking of which, those were pawn breaks. G4 was a pawn break. He just chose to bypass. C4 was a really early pawn break or pawn lever. He just bypassed. B5 is a pawn break. H5 is pawn break. And by the way, you kind of see where it's going. He's going to bypass because he's going to make a really big V. You can see where it's going, right? Let's see how he does it, though. So, yeah, he doesn't take. He doesn't check yet. He's ultra patient. It's like ultra patience here. Okay, rook H2. But like I said, but look, if he takes, the queen's coming in and he doesn't, and yeah, that's just bad. You don't want to play H6 and let him open. Yeah, that's just bad. So anyway, yeah, or he'd take H5 first, whatever. The king is just gonna get in a very bad way. So he goes rook H8, rook H2, queen C7, queen C3, queen back, nothing to do. So now you start to see the bind where your opponent has nothing better to do but to shuffle. So this is where they're like putty in your hands at this point, which is fun, right? That's the fruit of your, well, not quite the fruit of your labor, but you're gonna get there. This is
But that's a sweet situation to be in because as far as
Definitely.
Capablanca is concerned, because you got him so constricted now that you would think that, oh, I'm gonna win this in no time.
right. Don't get
You
too far ahead of
don't
yourself.
win,
Right. You know
but
it's coming, but don't reap it yet. Don't reap yet. But yeah,
right,
the fruit is ripe. The fruit is getting sweeter, right? And then we
right.
wait for the right time to harvest. So I'm coming over here. And that's the difference between positional play and tactical play. It's like knowing when to take it, right? So positional play would be like your preparation, your cultivation, growing your plants and everything. And then you have to be tactical in terms of like, this is just ideally the right moment to harvest and how much
Take
you
care,
can.
Leah.
See you later.
Hi there.
So yeah, we're gardening, we're farming here. We're going farming for our opponent's pawns and squares and pieces and king eventually. We're gonna harvest that king. So H6 check, king F8, and then we take. Now this is deep, right? So what he does is he only plays it because he has H6 check.
Okay.
Now you see the direct relationship tactically and strategically between the two sides. It's really beautiful. So B5, why is it possible? Takes H6, king F8. Now he recaptures. And this is exactly getting at your point about taking on B5, Nikki. Now he doesn't get to take on B5. Why not? He shouldn't. Why not?
I guess because you can infiltrate maybe on the A on the 8th rank.
Well, no matter what, well, let's see. I mean, you could do it now if you want to. Oh, but he's going to move his king. Yeah, he
Oh,
moves
yeah,
his king.
yeah. Okay.
But oh, right. Like, oh, but I see what you're saying. Like, so if takes, check. No, it doesn't matter because the king just moves anyway. So there's nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, there's nothing there yet. Good question. Good idea though to think about it. You gotta ask if it works. It's kind of funny though the way he made him, like he actually timed it out when he maneuvered. It's just a little subtlety here. When he maneuvered the queen to A1 because he knew he's gonna go. He knew he's going back and forth. So like, okay, you want to go to G8? I'm gonna go to A1. You want to go back? I go to A3. Now you go back. I have my queen on the diagonal where your king's gonna be. You see the subtlety there?
Yes.
So the strategic idea breakthrough would be B5. Another a sort of sub idea there is you want to break through without making the bishop, without having a bishop trade, because you want to be able to take back, but you want to take back on B5 and break through,
Oh,
not.
okay. Okay.
And then the tactical idea is I need to do that without him, or I need to do that where tactically he can't take because he loses his bishop.
Oh God, yeah, you just pushed
He
the
wants to
pawn.
trade bishops, he loses his bishop. You see how it works?
Yeah, you just pushed the pawn.
You guys see
Discover.
it?
Yeah,
Because the king is exposed now. So he lined it up beautifully. You see it?
yeah, that's nice.
Does everyone else see it?
Yep.
Yep.
You see it? Yeah, that would have been over.
Damn.
Check. Okay, trade queens. That's fine. I assume he would trade queens. Yeah, that's fine. We trade queens and we win the bishop. And that, yeah, and then we guard the pawn. Yeah,
And
that's
he
game.
gets back into his spot.
And then we come over with a rook. And then finally we can take this if we want to, but we get to take it for the knight and not the bishop, right? And then the rooks come in. Yeah, yeah, exactly. He gets the knight into the sweet spot. So he gets to keep his knight's bishop, keep his knight. And if you still want to do this, okay, we can get rid of your knight, but now we have a lone knight and no contested, right? Nothing to contest it. So yeah, it's pretty nice.
And his V is still intact almost.
The pawn.
The V.
Oh yes, exactly. He still has the V. And now we're gonna get an even more beautiful V. So it's a memorable V, you know. That's why it's yeah, V Day or something. Maybe they've called it that before. Yeah, it's very memorable. You look at this position, you're like, you can't really forget this, right? It doesn't happen
Right.
much. It's funny, I actually saw someone, there were some GMs like 2 years ago, I think, and he had this scenario. He was like, oh, he's trying to pull it, he's trying to pull the V for victory game. He's trying to pull off the same pattern. He almost had it. It wasn't quite as decisive, but I think he did win. Yeah, it wasn't as glorious, but it was still like pretty close in terms of mimicking the V. I think he got his full V in or close to it. But yeah, it's just an example of a really strong player outplaying a much weaker master, right? So we have come behind here. Now we're letting our rook lead. But you see how that worked out. The key idea is you got your break in, you did it favorably because of tactics. So the marriage, as I say, the marriage of positional and tactical play, the perfect harmony of the two, right? The interplay. Because you can't just do positional play, you can't just do tactical play, right? So they kind of go back and forth. Positional play, so the positional play, superior position. Tactical play allowed this to happen, leading to a superior position, pushing, which leads to more tactics to get a completely winning position, right? So you see it's kind of positive feedback here. So you double up now. But here's the thing: all you have going for you is the A file. Well, the A file in the 7th rank. That's all you've got here, and maybe 95 if the knight moves. So you have to ensure that when you plan this out, it's enough for you, right? It doesn't look like much. You have just enough here, but if it's not enough, it's like, oh, this is all for nothing. It looks really cool. You have aesthetically a highly pleasing V, right? And you have nice domination of the A file, you know, but almost all Black's pieces on the back going, oh, and let's do another. But you have to make sure it works, right? You have to have a finish. Well, you could do. You get the idea. You can easily calculate. You can count how many moves Black has, right? Because of the space advantage, it very concrete. They only have one rook move, right? They have no queen moves. They have one move with the rook. This is not illegal, but it does lose the piece, right? So one safe rook move, one safe. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. Isn't that crazy?
That's not good.
Five legal moves that don't lose someone.
That's
Okay.
good for white though.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
day for
you can
white.
approximate. You can
Even though
approximate.
even though
I'm guessing. You can take a guess and count later. I'm guessing like,
yeah.
I don't
Well,
know,
even though
20,
he
20
has
at
the
least.
A file, he has that going. He still has travel constricted in such a way that. So what would they do at this point? Like this? I mean, I know he won, but did he resign?
No, he played on. He played on until the tactical blow. Well,
Okay.
there were 2 tactical blows actually, and then you finish him off. But yeah, there's nothing to do. So now he's in. So earlier he was kind of shifting his rooks. And then he had like 8 legal, maybe 6 or 8 legal moves. Now he has, what was it, 3 legal moves, right? No, 4. Was it just 3? Just 3 legal moves. No,
1, 2, 3.
4 legal moves that don't lose anything, right? So before he might have had like twice as many, or 6 or 8 or something. So yeah, then he was shuffling. Now he's really just confined to shuffling his bishop and king. Okay, so Capablanca is like waiting a little bit. I'm guessing he was moving. He's on move 47. I'm guessing there's like 60 and move 60. There was probably time gained or something. They have multiple time controls usually. So what he does is he shuffles his king. He's like, you know what? Actually, I want to be here, because then he's sure there's nothing. There's no tricks. Interestingly enough, if you want to move the knight, there's some lines where, what would it be? You know, this is crazy. If the king takes, then the queen would, no. No, if the pawn takes, I mean, you could fall for a mate
Ooh.
if you're not careful. But you never know. I mean, that looks that's an unpleasant prospect. So you know, things like that. So like, you know what? If I'm on G2, there's no trick, because I mean, you want to look out. You're going to move your knight soon, right? You don't want any sort of sack Yeah, for example, like knight takes, pawn takes, the queen comes in. There's no queen coming in after the knight sack. You have to look out because that's all he has. That's like the Hail Mary here. You have to watch out for the one thing they're hoping for, right? So you give him, you take that away. You probably gain, now it's move 51. I don't know, maybe he's closer to gaining time on the clock if he needs it. Speaking of time management, okay. That's another way, yeah, go for move 40. Usually have a sudden death. So 92. Okay, why are we doing this? Like, what's that? So again, we need to have a finish now. We need to prove that we can finish this. Otherwise, we just have a nice looking position. So what's the actual, what is the finish gonna entail? What are we aiming at? Where are the targets or target?
Target, one of them would be B3, A5,
A5 with what?
and C6.
I like what you're getting at, but you're saying B3 with what, the knight?
Yeah, yeah. You said, well, what is he trying to do by going to D2?
Uh-huh. Yep, exactly. You found a pathway you found the pathway that he wants.
Right.
Yep. So he's going for, let's see, what color is that? I don't know what color that is. I think it's green. Okay, let's see, we're going here. That's blue, that's fine. Okay. And then we're going to B3. And then, oh wait, how's this work now? They switch, they altered things. Okay. Zoom has new things now. Okay. Then we go to A5. And then you said C6. Yeah, we're looking at C6 and what else?
Uh,
Wait, where'd he come from again? I'm sorry.
F3,
Okay.
F3 to
I
D2.
was gonna be like, oh, what, maybe he could do like maybe H4 and try to sack on but I don't think that works.
I mean, that's a good idea. Yeah, not quite, but it's a good idea too.
Yeah.
I'm sure you looked at all
It,
that.
it
But
seems
this is
like
the most
everybody's over there
accessible.
though. Yeah.
But yeah, we do have an X-ray on it. Keep in mind that's actually relevant. We do have an X-ray looking at H7. So, and we might have some ideas over there. But yeah, so we have D2, and I can actually, I guess, okay. So D2 to B3, to A5. And what are we aiming at? I was gonna make some X's.
Well,
uh,
B7, like you
yeah, B7,
see.
or yeah, B7 or C6.
Exactly. There are our target pawns. So C6 is more fortified. B7 not so much. We want to win the
Right.
pawn. Actually, if it's our move on A5, not A5, rook takes B7, queen's gone, right? Because the queen has no move. So if we can back up the rook, we win the queen and we win the pawn. See,
Yeah.
or the knight, or for the rook, yeah. So yeah, that would be over. So we can
Yeah.
anticipate that if we want to move our knight over here, then black is going to need a defense. Well, all black has is knight d8. That's it. Because what's the thing? They can't go. What was the other hope? Rook d. Oh, they actually can't go rook d7. They need knight d8 to cover, but they actually can't. Rook d7 fails immediately to what?
Rook A8?
Right. You can't go rook a8 now. Actually, funny enough, if you go rook a8 right now, you might. Well, I don't know about lose, but you have nothing at all. Look at this. Get rid of that. So like if you let's go back to the arrow thing. Okay, where's the arrow thing? I'm gonna take it off. All right. So if you go here, instead of knight g2, for example, and then queen's falling, right? So let's say she takes, you take, they take. We've just given up a queen for 2 rooks. Is that, first of all, is that even a good number of points, point-wise?
No.
Secondly, is that good positionally?
No to both.
Right. Our main advantage was the A file. So we just gave
We just gave it up.
on a platter. And then they could just do like rook somewhere, like doubling here. And then we
I'm
want
so
to do
greedy, I
like, I'm
probably would
not
have done
gonna
it.
work anymore. Was that the way she said it?
I'm so greedy, I probably would have done this.
I was thinking, yeah, Lynn was right on point, which you said, but you would have gone for it. Yeah, but then you're gonna, well, this is losing, obviously, if you allow that, but of course, but this is coming in. You can't really stop some invasion. Maybe if this is pretty lame if you have to do this. Okay, now the rook's coming here. That's under attack. I'm not sure if I mean, obviously there's no win because they still can't use these guys. I don't think there's any way to
You
use.
know, you gave up your big advantage when you went
Yeah.
down to H8. I mean, AA.
Yeah, there's no win. I don't think anyone's winning. I think it's like a fortress scenario, but it's no one. Yeah, you gave up your win. So that's why though, Rook D7 fails. Rook D7 loses. Oops. Uh-oh, I gave you a little sneak peek. Okay. So Rook D7 here is failing because then you have Rook A8 because there's only two covering. So now we actually win the Queen for Rook because we get to take, and then and that's game obviously. And then you're in. You still, even now, you need a little more, right? Funny enough, because black still has a kind of a quasi fortress going on, but that's where we're gonna no, but then you'd have like your knight coming in, or like you'd have ways to attack B7 and stuff. It's actually similar to the game, but you'd have more material. So here's the only way: Bishop D7, Rook over, and then Knight D8. So he saw it's coming. Like the moment he went Knight D2, Trey was like, all right, I got to set up this defense, but it still loses. So but the point is we've targeted the weakness. We know the only way they can cover is with 98. And now we have to find the finish. What would it be? Again, we have so many, well, we have a lot of mobility. They have no mobility basically. So we can take our pick, but we really only have one way to break through ultimately, because it's still kind of tight space, kind of tight quarters in there, right? It's kind of like you're doing a little like you're a mechanic in there, like trying to work, how it's kind of tight there, trying to reach into the engine, right? A little uncomfortable, right? But you got
Good
to make.
analogy.
What's that?
So
Good
David,
analogy.
at this
Yeah, so
point,
this made me think of that. Like we have the victory, we can hopefully fix it, but we
right,
you got to get in there. It's kind of hard.
at this point, would he reroute his knight again back to the right side of the board?
We don't need to. We actually don't need
He
to.
doesn't
I
need
see
to.
what you're saying. It's kind of interesting, like in terms of how he brought, or at least induced black's rooks to move over to the right, to the king side. Then he broke through here, and now I make him go back again. No, but he's come over here. He has enough now. He's come
Okay.
back. He's returned to the queen side, but then he got his breakthrough. He returns. Now his h6 pawn is actually an asset though, because well, one, it squeezes, and two, it allows this stuff to happen sometimes. So the seventh rank is vital here, and it's the only thing we've got other than the rook a8 idea sometimes. So how do we break through? There's only one way to do it, and that's effective. What is it?
Would the knight just take B7?
Actually, I was thinking about that too. There's another way. It's just you have to think about the different move orders, but knight takes b7, and then what's going to happen? How would you try to get him next? I think it might work, but if you have a cleaner way, but this might actually work.
Maybe the bishop?
Yeah, then the bishop would come in,
Yeah.
and that's going to fall. So if they go back, then that falls. Yeah, that's winning, and then the rook falls too. But now you're threatening here. No, that would win. I'm not sure. I think the way he did it might be winning more, but or I think he just chose a cleaner method basically, but it's probably working. So instead, it's just a cool looking move. Nikki, you said the bishop, right?
Yes.
Which
Because
move?
I can't see knight takes c6 at all. Like it's just too cut. Yeah, so that's
Right. So it's
definitely
either
out.
knight takes b7, it kind of factors in,
Yeah,
or like whether it's now or on the next move. What about the bishop?
that's nice. Okay, that makes sense.
What is
Oh,
it?
bishop a6.
Yeah, because you have the pin. Now, interestingly, we were really, really, really did not want to trade off bishops. So ultimately, if they take, you take the bishop through the X-ray, but it doesn't matter. The board doesn't care what used to be there. The only thing that matters, or Kaisa, the goddess of chess, the only thing she cares about is what you have now. Well, I mean, maybe
That's
she's
such a,
judging,
yeah,
unless
that's
she might be
mhm.
judging you. No, she might be judging you like, you could have done a better job. But no, the only thing that matters in terms of like the logic of what's available is right now, right? Even though, so in other words, don't get fixated on the bishop. It'd be very easy, like, nah, I'm gonna have to trade bishop. Well, look, yeah, that's irrelevant now. The only thing that matters is that you're in, you have a protected pass pawn. You're probably going to win you're going to win the a6 pawn. You're about to win the h7 pawn unless they block, but you've broken through and you have look at that beautiful pawn chain, protected pass pawn. Plus you have a tactical finish, because after rook here, the only way to stop you, no, I guess they could go king here. That doesn't look too pleasant. Yeah, I'm sure you have other things, but you could just like literally move your knight and take you can literally just move your knight back if you want, and then you just take here and you come in with both rooks. I mean, you have many ways to win. You are now up material and you're breaking through. So basically it was a pseudo sacrifice, right? You give up your bishop, you get their bishop, but it was also like sacrificing your superior bishop, right? You're mostly giving away the better piece and for the worst piece. That's kind of the only sacrifice. But you're doing that in order to obviously get huge gains in terms of invasion and getting you didn't have a pass pawn, now you do. So you gain a lot of things for it. Now after rook e7, what's the finish? So we have a nice mix, right? So again, we have superior position, tactics, superior position. No matter what happens, even without tactics, you're superior. Now tactics again. What's the tactic to finish the game? They can resign in 2 moves.
Well, you could sack your rook. Well, not sack it, but I mean, rook check looks pretty nice.
And then what happens after? You guys envision this, guys. You see rook takes knight check. Okay, you're giving up an exchange, but then again, these are pseudo sacrifices or temporary sacrifices. You get it back immediately. I mean, I guess you could say, what is a queen sacrifice pseudo if it leads to a checkmate? You're not really sacrificing anything. You're trading a queen for a king, right? But I mean, effectively, the fact that you're giving up a queen to find something, right? But in this case, it's just immediate. It's more in other words, it's more transactional because it ultimately
Then you have the fork with the knight.
Trade of pieces. Although you win a pawn. Do you guys see what John? Did you see what the tactic is after rook takes knight? Was that John?
Yeah, that was John.
Or John, if you want to. Otherwise, I'm involuntarily calling on you. If you see it.
Yeah, he said
I'm looking for it, but I don't see it. Rook takes knight, and where's the tactic?
C6 fork.
Yes, you see it now.
C6.
You lure, so you decoy the rook. Well, you can.
Yeah.
You're almost attracted in a way. You're decoying it from the pawn. You're attracting it to get.
Oh
pulled,
yeah,
right?
I see it
So you
now. Yeah,
pull it to c6, a c8.
Yeah.
I mean, rather you get.
yeah.
You
I
pull
see
it to
that. You
d8,
got a royal fork at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, nice, huh? Well,
Yeah,
even better would be if the king's in the if the king's in the crosshairs, even better. But this is good enough. Yeah, but now we can have fun finishing them off. But they resign. But you can see we already have. It's only 1 pawn currently, right? But when the queen moves, we can easily take the a pawn on the next move. So let's well, we can go ahead and take this one. We'll get to the back. We can weaken the back rank. Now I mean, that's game over, right?
yeah.
2 connected, protected, pass pawns. They're connected, but this one's
Can't
also
get
protected.
better than that.
And look, the
That's worth
V.
like a rook.
He still got the V there.
He still has the what?
The V.
The V.
The V did not go away yet. Yeah, it's just his
No,
opponent
it
doesn't
didn't
have
go
like
away.
the opponent doesn't have a W anymore or an M from their perspective, but you still have a V. You've just
Right.
destroyed half of their M. Now they have like a check mark or something. Yeah, you're coming in. Check, we want. Okay. So we have rook takes. Yeah, you're threatening to win the queen. So they come down. We can win in a few different ways. We can definitely just go here. That's good enough, right? We're gonna promote.
Yeah, pass
Well, what do
pawns
you-
need to be pushed.
Yes, just push your pass pawns. Go here. Watch out for any checks. I don't think there will be any checks for them. You can easily cover. We can just do this or this. Yeah, that's good enough. But I feel like there must be a cleaner win. I think what you can do is I think we can just like maybe just trade. Because we're gonna, just promote, right? So let's say they take, you just take with check, and then you're gonna easily push this guy in and either mate or win the queen, right? So that'll do the job. Yeah, so it's either way. But it's a really nice game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
That's a great game.
Yeah, what do you guys
And I'm gonna memorize that because, or not memorize, but remember it because of that V. Because it's
Yes.
like a pawn storm. And once you get those pawns in place, you just push them and, till you can get up to, like you say, in the end, you get another queen. But I love that. That was excellent.
Yeah, that's a great game.
Yeah, it's a
That's
game.
like
It's like a
something.
must know. It's just there's so many value, just so many motifs, so many fundamental kind of chess truths that you can take from this game, you can extract, right? I mean, if you understand this game, you understand a lot of chess, right? Because you can explain to somebody so many things. And like you could teach someone the Immortal game or the Opera game, like Night at the Opera,
Right,
and whatever. You can teach them a few things like, rapid development,
right.
toward the center, attack weak points, queen sacrifice, but here it's deeper. This is deeper. You guys obviously ready for this, but here you learn so many positional ideas, right? Let's just name a few. Like, I mean, but the other thing is position, as I said, positional combined with what?
Tactical.
Right, like right here. So positional, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And again, going back to the notion of the squeeze, that takes away pretty much all their options, which gives you very much one-sided play. That's the fun thing about closed games. If it goes in your favor, it could very much be a one-sided game. Open games kind of more like a melee, right? Usually, except we just saw those Furman games, which were still pretty. He had a pretty tight grip, but he interestingly did opt for more, or ended up with more open games. This is very much about as close as you can get, right? Or maybe Black's pawn will end up like here. That would be even more like locked up. But here, de facto locked up because nobody wants to push the e-pawn. It's like a game of chicken, right? No, if you push, I take. I push, you take, right? Pretty hard to make that happen because you got two on it, right? Two pawns that you just lose the pawn and then some probably. So unless you have like a tactic to break through, but ultimately, yeah, he doesn't need that because he has the break. So why don't we name? I will. How about this? I will type it on the side. A couple of just to brainstorm, kind of brainstorm after the fact. Just kind of shout out a few key themes, and I'll type it on the right. What do you guys
Bishop
think?
versus strong knight.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure, but is that?
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, let me get I'll get green. Yeah, absolutely. Weak bishop versus. Okay, is it showing up?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what else?
Avoid trading your pawns.
When? Avoid trading, like, and what's like why or when? You're referring to space, right?
Well, yeah, because if you're gonna maintain that V, he pushed that B pawn later on in the game. He maintained it at A4 and B4, but then later on he pushed. So you want to avoid, and because if you avoid trading your pawns, you don't weaken your position.
Interesting. And also there are specific scenarios. So there are certain conditions that make what you're saying even more effective. So like, for example, I mentioned the G pawn, like we looked at that, where you made the point about the G pawn for the F pawn, but really you're not trading the G pawn for the F pawn. It's the G pawn, it's the G4 pawn for the E6 pawn, because the F pawn gets replenished. If spaces, so really the ones that are removed, if you take F5, you see it on this position, right? If you were to take F5 at any point, the E pawn takes back. So avoid trading pawns, as you said, like, or especially when you have more space. You know what? Interestingly, you have more space, or basically, and intend to keep it based on kind of on
Structure, the V structure.
yeah, based on V structure or whatever it may be. In this case, V structure, yeah, based on advantages conferred or whatever, advantages provided by pawn expansion or something like that. So basically you expand your pawns for a purpose, right? In order, you don't expand them to just like and gain like a fence to have your fence destroyed, right? Or your fortress, unless you get something else out of it, like like B5, it could have gotten traded off, but it didn't. But if it gets traded off, you do so to break open lines, for example, and that's another. And then you have space in terms of like mobility. You have, again, what does it come down to? What's the purpose of space? Mobility. Well, your mobility and their lack thereof, right? Also avoiding, and I'll just mention avoiding trading what else when you have more space?
Your superior pawns.
Oh, not pawns now. What else?
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's all under the, yeah, as you said, definitely.
okay,
That's
okay.
all under the, actually, it's interesting because I was thinking pieces, but you're right. The pawns is very important. And the more pawns you trade, the more, as you said, the more your position gets exposed, but so does your opponent's. That's kind of like who does it favor more, sort of thing.
Right.
And in that case, we effectively traded like the B6, no, the A pawn and the B pawn. Once we sacrificed, we effectively traded off those pawns. We got rid of the B pawn, we came through. So that was when it favored us. But especially if you want that space advantage, you hold off. You don't trade a pawn if it just gives away your space for no reason, right? Unless you have to have really good reason, like breaking through. And avoid trading pieces. Why? Avoid trading pieces when, rather. There are two versions actually. Two when you don't trade pieces. Generally speaking.
When you're ahead, avoid trading them when you're ahead.
Ahead on what? Space?
Space.
The advantage, initiative.
Yeah, you could say that because if you're trying to attack, there are some scenarios where you want to trade pieces just to expose the king more, like if there's some pieces guarding, but usually you want more attackers when you're going after them. But also, if you are no, it goes both ways. Avoid trading pieces when you have more space or less material. That's another topic.
Hmm.
Because if you have more, in other words, if you have more material, you want to trade pieces because you want to get to an endgame where you're up like, if you're sure it's a winning endgame with an extra pawn, but especially if you have like a knight, as long as there's some pawns left, you can use that extra knight to pick off some pawns / assist your pawns to promote, right? But that's we didn't learn that in this game, but we've talked about that before. Liquidation, right? That would be the liquidate. That would be a liquidation, as in you want it when you're ahead and you don't want it when you're behind on pieces, on materials. That makes sense? Because the ratio thing, 9 to 10 versus 3 to 4 versus 1 to 2. In other words, you have twice as much material if you trade everything down to 2 to 1. But if you have a bunch of pieces, 99, let's say 99, for example, 99 to 100, there's hardly a difference there, right? You can hardly tell the difference. It gets watered down the more you have. Does that make sense? Well, we want
Yes.
to concentrate or just still our material advantage. So weak bishop versus strong knight based on pawn structure, right? Because the pawn structure in relation to that bishop. Because again, the fact that the bishop was on the light squares, and we very intentionally went bishop g5 to trade off our quote bad bishop for their quote good or bishop that could have been good. And now the bishop that could have been bad, absolutely ended up being bad, right? So weak bishop versus strong knight. Avoid trading pawns when you have more space. So kind of how you're getting that space and how you're keeping it as you're getting it in. Avoid trading pieces when you have more space. Well, think of it like this. When you have, as for the space element, we're talking about the material element. When you have more space, that means, well, your opponent has less space and less maneuverability. So if they have more pieces, they get more jammed up. If they have like 2 pieces, they can still move them more. But when you had like 5 pieces with little space, it's like a bunch of people in a small room or like in a beetle car or something, right? Like and they like trying to like stack themselves into a beetle, right? That's pretty uncomfortable, especially if you're claustrophobic. But if you have if you only have 2 people in the beetle, that's probably fine. But if you have like 6, not so much, right?
Yeah.
So
Maybe you should throw in like, because there was like one little trick that he had, like keep an eye out like for counterplay, even though it looks like there's none, like, but you spotted that queen thing.
yeah, exactly. Wait, I'll move back on that. Hold
There
on.
was like a
I'll
knight
make them
stack.
small. I'll make them smaller or something. But okay, I'm not sure if I can go back. If I can take
That's
that.
okay.
I
It's
will.
just
No,
like a
no,
thought.
I want to put more, but
Ugh.
well, there is the whiteboard thing. Okay, whatever. We know this. This exists. Now I'll just keep that over here. All right. Wait. What if we do this? No, that's not going to help. That won't help. Uh, I'll just put it on. I'll just put it over here now on the left. Okay. So you mentioned about avoiding counterplay. Yeah, absolutely. Because there was that hope of breaking through based on where your king was on the king side, and you made sure it didn't work, right? So
Yes.
when you're ahead, or don't relax, because then you're like, remember you meant, oh, I'd be very comfortable, I got this. The moment you start
Hmm.
thinking about it, you start thinking, oh yeah, this is gonna be nice. I'm gonna enjoy a nice dessert after the game. Then you start to get into trouble, right? So when you're ahead, be extra vigilant about avoiding counterplay, right? And never relax until you have them. Or I say they're a rattlesnake until they resign, right? Even if they seem like a dead rattlesnake, right? You can still get bit, right? So be
Wait,
careful.
what is it called? What is it? A rattlesnake? What? I never heard this.
They're a rattlesnake. No, that's just what I say. They're a rattlesnake until they resign. Because
Nice.
even if it's like a baby rattlesnake or whatever, or if it's dead, like baby rattlesnakes will give you more venom apparently, right? At least I've heard that. Or like, but even if they're dead, can't you like step on them and they'll like bite you still, right? Like
Yeah.
reflex or something. So they have to like completely be done. You have to have that point scored. Write it down, sign the paper or whatever, sign your score sheets. Okay, it's definitely done. Now you can probably relax. Probably not a bad idea. Then you should
It's
relax.
very funny that you say that, because I saw a dead little baby snake yesterday. He wasn't a rattlesnake, but I
Okay.
never see snakes around here. And it's like, is
Okay.
that a snake? And there he was. And took a
So
picture of him.
maybe it's we're foreshadowing what's to come in our chess game.
Yeah.
So okay, anything else? Any other final thoughts Lessons learned.
That the formation of the pawn structure really restricted Black's pieces, really restricted, because they had, each, like the rook and the bishop and the knight, including the king, they didn't have much places to move to. They were really restricted to their side of the board the entire game.
Yeah. So really, that's gonna make it very uncomfortable for them, and like they just either didn't have legal moves or didn't have moves that didn't drop pieces. And you can see again, kind of basically mathematically, you can have a formula, I guess, but you can just count. Maybe Xander would have a formula. He has like cool formulas for different chess principles, but to solve puzzles and stuff. But yeah, you can have it's definitely mathematical in terms of how many squares are available based on the pawn structure. And and again, that's kind of the traditional view, the way that I've learned about space, that I've thought also in terms of hypermodern play. But traditionally, the classic big center gives you more space to maneuver behind it. It's kind of like a shield, right? Or like your territory, a fortress, or whatever you want to call it, your fence. You can maneuver behind that. Well, I guess that's in terms of definitely in terms of closed positions where the pawns are locked. But even if the pawns aren't locked, if you have two pawns rolling forward, like that still gives you a lot of space. But I guess it's more like, but then what I would get at is, yes, that's space, but what does space confer? Mobility, right? Now, if you don't have as much space in the traditional sense, like let's say they have all the pawns rolling at you, but you get around the pawns. You have like a bishop, like hypermodern play, like you play c5 like a Benoni, and you provoke them to push forward, but then it opens up your diagonal for your bishop on g7, or like in a dragon, right? You get that g7 bishop. Well, you don't have any pawn. Well, you do have maybe the c pawn supporting it, but you don't have much space based on your pawns. Ironically, based on the fact that they push so much, it's giving you mobility. So is that space or not? It's kind of moot. I don't know exactly what the theory is on that, but pretty much the theory is, generally speaking, the way I've learned it is pawn pushes give you space. You play e4, they play e6, you got more space. You push in a French, e4, e6, d4, d5, d4, e4, e6, d4, d5. If you bypass, you have more space, right? You have like a pawn in their territory. You push into their territory, that space. Now, as for whether it's good or not, it really depends how much mobility you have. But fundamentally, it gives you, it should give you more squares to move to. Now it matters where they can move to, whether it's impactful or not. Right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, formation of the pawn structure. In this case, you will not say basically the unforgettable V formation in this game, right? So yeah, once you see it, it's pretty hard to forget that.
In this game, e4 and e5 was like a treacherous area that neither one of them wanted to venture into.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's like the demilitarized zone, right?
Uh-huh.
No one's going there, or
Right, no one's going there.
hopefully no one's running over that zone, right? Like the guy did.
Well, David,
Yeah,
this was very, very informative to me. I know a lot of Capablanca's play, but this V is very memorable to me, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to put it together myself, because I have played like this where I push the pawns like a pawn storm, but now that I see the V and how that you can work it with the B, the B pawn, and I mean, because he continually built his V. He didn't just start as a V. He continually throughout the game built his V,
And the
and
bypassing.
he didn't trade him, and that was giving him his strong points.
Yeah, you got the slow build up, slow, I would say methodical, very methodical,
Yes.
Yes.
slow
Yeah.
methodical build up.
I'm so sorry. I have to go, but I just
Oh no,
wanted to
go ahead.
thank you
No, I
guys.
think
And
that's no, I think
yeah.
that pretty much all
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Take care,
go
Nikki.
too, but
I think that pretty much we hit it. We'll go ahead and then we'll see if there's anything
Okay.
else. But
Have
all
a
right,
great
see you next week.
weekend. Thank you
Okay,
so
you too.
much. Okay.
Oh,
All
my
right.
pleasure. Nice
Okay.
job. Nice comments. Take care. Yeah, you get some really good
Yeah,
ideas.
David,
So,
I've been
is there
drinking
anything else? I guess we can end a little earlier than usual, or anything else?
No, this was very informative, instructional, educational. I love it.
Glad you enjoyed it. You want me to stop the video?
Whatever you
I like
want to do, David.
The one thing I liked about this was
Mhm.
the tactical play at the end.
Mhm.
Um, So you have to really be good at your tactics to figure out what you were going to do next. And he brought that.
Exactly, John.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, John, because you saw that knight moving there, and I didn't see the tactical until you pointed it out. So exactly. Exactly.
You need sharp tactics to you know, to convert, because you can be a wonderful positional player, which yeah, that's kind of my emphasis. I like to be a positional player, I suppose. Now I gotta be well-rounded. I also like aggressive tactical play, but you know, sometimes I focus too much on it, partially because it's almost like, tactics, we can all study tactics, we can all look at puzzles. It's like, I want to do something creative that you can't just do like almost mathematically, right? But it's kind of like studying openings. Like, oh, we can all study openings, I want to do something different, right? That's where the creativity element comes in. But yeah, you got to, even if it's a mundane tactic, you know, like a fork. No, who doesn't like a good tactic, right? But you know what I'm saying? I like to get deeper. No, but you combine that with your deep positional knowledge. That's where the fun is. That's where it's highly intellectually stimulating. You got to do both all the time. And whenever you're thinking of, hey, is this going to give me a better position? When the rubber meets the road, you got to do your tactical calculations. And you got to see, look, is there something I'm missing here? There may be no tactic at all. Or maybe there's a tactical possibility embedded in those lines, but maybe it never comes to pass. You still have to be aware of it, though, to make sure it doesn't, to make sure your whole, you know, beautiful buildup doesn't get spoiled, right?
Right.
And he did that with the b5 push. He checks the king, lures the king onto the diagonal, then allows us slow and then sharp tactics to ensure, let's say, clean conversion into victory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gotta,
And the limited movement.
convert. You gotta execute. What's
And
that?
the limited movement of the all the pieces, the king, the bishop, the rook, they only had like one or two places to move. That was it. I found that fascinating. That was really nice.
Just how you know, it's yeah, again, super memorable. You don't see that very often, right?
Yeah.
And what was that attributable to? How would you describe that? What led to that?
The pawn structure.
It's all about that. And what was it? What about the pawn structure? I mean, it's
And
pretty
the
much
bad bishop.
it's pretty elementary at that point. But what how would you describe it to like a beginner?
Gee, I don't know.
Like if you were to say what about the pawn structure made it so that black
So the pawn
gray
structure,
ball here hardly had any moves?
yeah. So you have the pawn structure which stopped all their pawns from moving, and they had the bad bishop, which limited. Well, the pawn structure limited everything. It limited the
Right. So locked up.
all
So
the pieces.
they're locked up. They're locked up pawns, but they were locked up in a way that favored white, favored Capablanca here. Why is that?
Well, D4, yeah, D4 and F4 really set the tone for it. D4 and E3, that set the tone for the beginning of the restriction. You know, because you know their D and F pawn cannot move. They're stationed in place forever. And like I said before, E4 and E5 is like a treacherous area that you don't want to go in. So it was excellent.
Yeah, and John, again, you know, you said this, again, what you just said. You did say it. Capablanca, they favored because they restricted the opponent's bishop, right? That's a huge part of it. Bishop, no, you know, because the same color, right? Same color squares as the bishop, and basically and everything else, and you know, and took away mobility of the other pieces because they'd be walking into traps. They're going to walk into a landmine, right? Yeah. So is that pretty much what you're getting out there? Locked up pawns favored Capablanca because they restricted pawn's bishop, took away all the mobility of the other pieces, and they allowed him to kind of control the levers, and he got to pull it at will. When he's ready, he goes. It's fun when you're like that, you know, when you can play like that. Complete one-sided game because that you're the one controlling the levers. If you open the dam, right? Complete one-sided game, and you're like, okay, I want to play C4. Oh, I decided to push C5. I want to go G4. Okay, now I'm gonna go G5. Now I'm gonna go H4. Oh, I'm gonna bypass, right? I'm gonna bypass your G5. Then I'm gonna go H4, H5, sack off of the pawn there. Now I'm gonna go with B5. And it's gonna work because I'm gonna check your king. Oh, then I'm gonna push to B6. Then I'm gonna invade. Then I'm gonna triple. Then I'm gonna sack. temporarily. Then I'm going to sack the rook temporarily. Then I'm going to fork you. Then I'm going to invade. Then I'm going to have 2 protected pass pawns. And I'm going to get a queen. So you get to do this, you get to do this, and you get to do this.
It's like a
You're
rolling ball, it's like a rolling down the hill. You rolling at that point, you're constantly rolling.
Inexorable, unstoppable momentum. Yeah, it's pretty nice. So that it's it's interesting when so this game, a lot of it's about pawn structure leading to superior space, leading to restriction, and clear planning along the way to ensure that you get those things that you want, that you don't lose your space,
And also
you don't let them come out.
And also the pawn structure allowed him to play both sides of the board.
Yes, that's another important aspect. I don't think I wrote it down, but you mentioned it a few times.
Yeah.
Very important. You emphasize that. Yeah, the 2 play, but interestingly, and again, playing on both. Well, it worked both ways, but playing on both sides of the board allowed him to ultimately swing back to the B file where he wanted to break. But if he had done it too early, it's like, look, here's the thing. Treyball was obviously he's not, he knows how to play chess pretty well. He's a strong player. He knows that Capablanca went to B5. He's going to prepare for that. But then when he includes the additional element of the king side play, he freaked out, right? Whether or not he didn't freak out, it's still going to be an additional thing of value over there. And then that helps him get B5. But actually the pawn on H6, it could lead to additional ways to win in the end, because you might be able to take the pawn and it further restricts the king. There might be a mating net because of that on the 7th rank. So yeah, it really had multiple benefits.
Especially if he wanted to bring his knight back over there to work with the pawn at H6,
that was actually it was a possibility. There may have been a sack. Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
It may not have come to pass in this game, but it's at least something to think about for sure.
Mobility.
Mobility for you and not for them. And you control, so you get your mobility, but remember, at the same time, you restrict them.
Exactly.
So full, and that's what I say, the maxim of maximize your pieces and minimize your opponent's pieces. That's exactly what's happening. And if you come to, let's say you're playing a blitz game, that's all you need to do. I maximize my forces, I minimize your forces. Pretty easy, right? That's the paradigm, the fundamental overall paradigm, I think, overarching.
It's called
you got to make the moves that'll actually allow that to happen. But
it's called the M&M, and I'm not talking about the candy. It's called maximize, minimize.
I like it. M&M. I didn't think about it. Yeah.
Okay, David.
All right, guys. All right, take care. I'll see you next week.
David, I enjoyed this very, very much.
I'm glad. Yeah, it sounds like it really struck a chord with you to make it memorable based on Capablanca.
It did, because I do pawn storms on a regular basis, because I know how they can restrict your opponents from coming into your area. And in this game, Treyball never did get on the other side of the board.
Well, here's the thing about it is it does 2 things. The way I view a pawn storm. One is it restricts them by gaining space, and 2, it may allow you to break through. So we saw both of those things occur. It's like he was gaining space, he made breakthroughs, but then he chose to bypass to gain more space, and then he made another breakthrough with the next leading pawn. It was
he chose to bypass.
He kept cascading.
He chose to bypass because he was constantly building his V.
Yes, and the V meant a vice. V is for victory. V is for vice, and therefore victory.
V is for victory
with a clean, with a nice clean finish. But awesome, really good, and yeah, because it was seems like the game itself was helpful for you, but then you reinforced that and made a lot of great comments that helped others. So I think so.
Okay, cool. So I'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye, John.
Take care. Bye.